Hey everybody, it's Emily at Arc Schooling, and today I wanted to talk about horror for scaredy cats. So I was thinking to myself the other day that, there are some books that I would consider to be like starter horror for people who are a little nervous to dive into that genre, especially if they've never read horror before. So I thought these books might be a good kind of introduction to horror, if you want to think of it that way. And I'm not going to count classics, like everyone would say Dracula, everyone would say Frankenstein. So yes, those books are great, and they're not scary as much as they're sort of disturbing and suspenseful. But I wanted to talk about more modern books today, so without further ado, let's just dive in. I have 5 books to show you. The first book I want to talk about is Unwind. This is by Neal Shusterman, and I wouldn't classify this necessarily as horror, but there are some really just very creepy, disturbing elements in this book. This is a story about an alternate America where there has been a civil war over reproductive rights, and so the pro-choice and the pro-life have kind of duked it out, and they've had this big war, and now we have this new system in place where abortion is illegal, but from the age of 13 to 17 you can choose to have your child unwound, which in essence, you're not killing the child because every single part of his body is going to be harvested for organs. So now you have this new, there's no more sickness, there's no more disease, there's no more problems because everything and anything can be cured with a new body part or organ. So there's a whole new set of ethics involved in this. You also have a lot of children getting storked, which you can't get an abortion, but it's perfectly legal to just stork a baby, which is just to leave that baby on someone's porch and then get away. As long as no one sees you, you can't be in trouble for it. So you get these babies just being left, so the foster care system is overrun, and a lot of kids get unwound. So it's very disturbing. There's one scene in particular that I still think about. I read this book like 2 years ago, and it still just like haunts me. So I would say this is a great starting place if you are wanting something creepy, but you don't really want to commit to a full-on horror novel. These next 2 books are technically children's books, but I still think they're really creepy, and I think they are legitimate horror novels, and they are both by Neil Gaiman. This one is The Graveyard Book, which is about a little boy who is raised by ghosts in a graveyard. This book has just about everything in it. There's vampirism, there's lycanthropes, there's like ghosts, obviously, and he is this strange little boy who is not quite human. There's a murder mystery involved. This is a great story. And while all those things might sound like it's really, really scary, I don't think it's scary as much as suspenseful and kind of fun. This is kind of, to me, like the essence of all those like 1950s and 60s horror where it's not really scary, but there are elements of it that could be considered scary, like the Wolfman and the old Dracula. So I think this book is a lot of fun. And the other one by Neil Gaiman is Coraline. This book actually completely freaked out my daughter, who now, of course, is my horror aficionado. But she read this, I don't know, how old were you, Sarah, when you read it? Like 11 or 12? Yeah, I think she was about 11 or 12 when she read this book, and it completely freaked her out. And I remember when the whole La La Loopsy thing was happening, she was completely and utterly terrified of those dolls. They had button eyes. So this is a story about a girl who they move into this house, and she finds this doorway to take her to this weird other world, which looks like her world. It has a mother and father there that look just like her mother and father, and except they have button eyes, and they want her to stay, and if she stays, she can be one of them. And it's very creepy. She tries to come back, and there's just this whole, it's very scary and very suspenseful, and it's a lot of fun. I think this book is awesome. I read this to my kids a year or 2 ago, and was it last year, maybe? And it was a really fun read aloud for Halloween. I highly recommend this if you want something scary, but you are still not sure about how deep into the horror world you're willing to go. The next book I want to talk about is Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Again, this book isn't so much scary as it's weird. This is the book about two sisters who live in this big house, and one of those sisters has some problems. She's got some issues. And the story is all about how the town kind of sees these girls and how they live and how they deal with these people in town. And it's really weird. It's a little bit sad, actually, I think, but it's also very creepy. But again, it's not really scary, so I think this is a really great introduction into the world of horror. And also Shirley Jackson is just, you have to read at least one of her books, right? And the last book I want to talk about is one I literally just finished like a couple of days ago, and that is Byrd Box by Josh Malerman. Now, this is probably the scariest in this pile that I've shown you. It is all about this epidemic or an apocalyptic event where suddenly these things come, and if you see them, you lose your mind and you kill yourself and you kill people. I think this is exactly what that movie, that awfulness that M. Night Shyamalan did, the Happening, this is what that should have been. Like, forget that. This is much better. This is basically, you can't see. You can't be outside with your eyes open. If you see it, you lose your mind. And you don't know where it is. It could be right in front of you. It could be off to the side. It doesn't matter. If you see it, you go crazy. So this story is about a woman and her two children and how they have to get to a safer place. And so she's got to take her children and travel there by boat, and she can't see. She has to navigate blindfolded. And this book goes back and forth in time from the beginning of the event to 4 years in when she's got these children, and it's very suspenseful, but it isn't nightmare-inducing. So I think this is a really great starting place, because while I found it incredibly suspenseful and there were a few scenes that made my heart race a little bit, I didn't find it overly scary compared to some of the other things I've read. So I would highly recommend this if you're wanting to get started in horror. Those are my 5 choices for getting started in horror without getting too deep into the really, really scary stuff. Do you have any other suggestions? What would you recommend people read for a beginning horror novel? I would love to hear about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye!